They thought I would die beside him. Neighbors, church ladies, even my own kin. They all whispered the same thing. She'll go when he goes. Women like her don't survive alone. For a long time I believed them. You don't reach 62 without learning how the world carves women down to size. My life felt like old fabric, patched and repatched, so thin you could see light through it. Every memory had holes in it where joy should have been. I met Harold when I was just 19. He was broad-shouldered, with the kind of laugh that carried across a room. My daddy used to say, "A man who laughs loud is a man you can trust." I believed that lie the way I believed every lie back then. He courted me with little things, a ribbon for my hair, a slice of sweet cake from the fair, promises whispered in the dark about the kind of life he'd give me. He told me he'd never let me go hungry, that he'd build me a home where rain never touched the floorboards, for a girl raised in a shack that smelled of mold and boiled potatoes that sounded like paradise. When he asked me to marry him, I didn't even pause to breathe before saying yes. The house he brought me to sat at the edge of the county road, big enough to impress, but plain enough to warn me it wasn't really mine. From the start, Harold drew lines. What friends I could keep, how often I could visit Mama, what clothes I should wear. He laughed when he said it, as if it were all just jokes. But the laughter faded, and the rules stayed. At first, it was small things. He corrected my grammar in front of guests, said my accent made me sound simple. He locked the money drawer for safekeeping. He told me I should be grateful he hadn't chosen someone prettier, someone who'd make him work harder to keep. Then came the harder things, the nights when his hand didn't just slam the table, but found my cheek. The mornings when he shoved me aside because the coffee wasn't hot enough. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, careful with every step. And still, I told myself it was love. We had 2 children, first Michael, then Ruth. I thought having them might soften him, that maybe fatherhood would put gentleness in his hands. But Harold wasn't softened. If anything, he grew harder, prouder, meaner. He strutted through town as though his family was proof of his strength. And inside the house, he used that strength to remind us who held the reins. Michael tried to be his shadow. By 14, he mimicked his father's sneer. He'd laugh when I hurried to clear Harold's plate, laugh at my silence, laugh at the bruises I hid with powder. Once, when I scolded him for shouting at Ruth, he leaned close and hissed, "You're just jealous Daddy respects me more than you." That was the day I realized the sickness in Harold had already spread to my son. But Ruth was different, quiet, watchful. She'd slip her small hand into mine after Harold's rages, as though she could tether me back to the earth. "Mama," she'd whisper, "why do you let him talk to you that way?" I never had the courage to answer. The years blurred into each other. Winters, when the roof leaked and Harold spent our money at the tavern. Summers, when he paraded me at picnics like a prize mare. I stayed. Through every season, I stayed. Because where would I go? With what? And how would I face the shame of being a woman who couldn't keep her husband? The house itself grew heavy with memory. The walls seemed to lean in, pressing against me, reminding me every hour of every day that I was a possession, not a person. until the night that cracked it all open. It was January, the wind howling like wolves outside. Harold came home late, stumbling drunk, the smell of another woman clinging to him. He didn't even try to hide it, just collapsed in his chair, boots muddy, shirt buttoned wrong, and barked at me to bring him food. When I hesitated, just for a second, because I couldn't breathe through the stench of perfume and whiskey, his hand lashed out. I hit the corner of the table so hard I thought I'd split my skull. But the real blow wasn't his hand. It was Ruth's eyes, watching from the doorway. She didn't look afraid. She didn't look sad. She looked disgusted. And in that instant, I understood. If I stayed, I'd teach her the same lesson my mama had taught me, that women endure, women bow, women survive by silence, that a man's temper is a storm you never outrun. I couldn't let that be her inheritance. That night, lying awake with the sting still burning my cheek, I asked myself the question I had never dared before. What if I walked away? The thought was like a match struck in the dark, dangerous, blinding, alive, and once it lit, I couldn't put it out. I tried to bury the thought the next morning. I rose before dawn, as always, lit the stove, boiled the coffee just the way Harold liked it. I folded his shirt crisp, laid out his boots by the door, moved through the house like a shadow. The routine was a lullaby I'd sung for decades. Keep quiet, keep small, keep him from noticing. But even as I poured his cup, the thought burned. What if I walked away? Every time I glanced at the door, I imagined stepping through it, not to fetch wood, not to fetch water, but to keep walking until the house was only a memory behind me. For weeks, I carried that thought like contraband. I said nothing. To speak it aloud would have been a kind of suicide. Harold had fists for discipline, and Michael had already learned how to sneer like his father. If they even suspected I was planning to leave, they'd cage me tighter, maybe worse. But silence doesn't shrink a thought, it fattens it. I began to test myself with small rebellions, folding back the corner of his shirts when he demanded them flat, setting his plate down a little too hard, leaving the lamp burning when he told me to douse it. Tiny things he barely noticed. But to me, each act was proof I still had pieces of myself. Ruth noticed. She was 12 then, all eyes and questions. One night, when Harold had drunk himself to sleep, she whispered, "Mama, why don't you just leave?" Her words nearly split me in two, not because she asked, but because she said it so plain, as though leaving were no harder than stepping outside to draw water, as though she hadn't yet learned how heavy invisible chains could be. I hushed her, told her to go to sleep, but her question echoed louder than Harold's snores. "Why don't you leave?" Why, indeed? I knew the answers too well. Where would I go? With what money? Who would take me in? The world isn't kind to women who walk away. But then again, the world hadn't been kind to me while I stayed either. The turning point didn't come from Harold. His betrayals were daily, worn thin with repetition. It came from Michael. He was 16, tall now, his voice deep, his pride deeper. One evening he staggered home with liquor on his breath, and I asked, too gently, still clinging to hope, where he'd been. He laughed in my face, laughed like his father. Then he said words that cut sharper than any belt or fist. "You'll never leave him, Mama. You're too weak." For a moment I forgot how to breathe. The world roared in my ears. Too weak. Maybe he was right. Maybe decades of bowing had bent me into something pitiful. But weakness wasn't what I felt then. What I felt was rage, raw, searing, a fire long smothered finally catching. Rage at Harold, rage at Michael, rage at myself. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen long after they'd gone to bed, my hands flat on the table, worn smooth by years of meals and tears. And I asked myself plain, what do I need to walk away? The answer came clear as a bell. Money. Money was freedom. Money was distance. Money was a roof where Harold's boots never stomped. So I began to steal, not much at first, a few coins from Harold's pockets when he snored too deep. $1 slipped from the grocer's change before Harold could see it. He guarded money like a dragon guards gold, but he was careless with whiskey in his veins. I stitched a secret pocket into the hem of my Sunday dress. Each clink of coin against fabric was a prayer, small, steady, dangerous. Ruth saw me once. I caught her eyes, wide and solemn, watching as I tucked something away. And in her gaze, I didn't see disgust. I saw hope. But Harold was no fool. Cruel, yes. Reckless, yes. But he could smell change like a dog smells blood. One night he cornered me in the kitchen. His face was flushed, his fists curled. "You stealing from me, woman?" he bellowed. I bowed my head, my heartbeat galloping. "No, husband." His hand hovered in the air, and I braced for the blow. But then he laughed, cruel and sharp. "You're too stupid to steal." That was his mistake. He believed his own words, because by then I wasn't stealing to survive. I was stealing to leave. Once you've decided to leave, every bruise, every insult, every slammed door becomes fuel. I began to test the edges of escape. On Sunday mornings, when Harold stayed abed nursing his hangover, I told him I was taking Ruth to church, and I did, at first. But afterward, I lingered by the well where women traded whispers over their buckets. That's where I heard about the boarding house 2 towns over, run by a widow, took in girls escaping bad marriages. "She asks no questions," one woman murmured, "just gives you a bed and work." My heart beat so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. A bed, work, a place he couldn't find me. I began collecting details like jewels, a bus that passed every Wednesday, a train that stopped at dusk, names of drivers who might give rides for cash. I tucked those details in my memory the way I tucked coins in my hem. The quilt of escape was stitching itself together. All I needed was time. But time is a luxury women like me are seldom given. The house had a way of tightening its grip whenever I thought I was ready. Michael grew sharper, hungrier for power. He had Harold's suspicion in his blood, and suspicion doesn't sleep long. One evening, he came into the kitchen while I was sewing. He leaned in the doorway, his grin crooked in that familiar, dangerous way. "What you working on so careful, Mama?" he asked. My needle froze. For a moment, I thought his eyes had found the bulge in my hem where coins lay stitched like secret prayers. But he only smirked, shook his head, and walked away. I didn't breathe until I heard the back door slam. That night, I knew my time was shorter than I thought. If Michael caught me, he'd drag me by the hair to his father and call me thief, and Harold would bury me under the floorboards before he let me disgrace him. I needed more than hope. I needed a plan. So I tested the world outside. Each Sunday, I lingered longer after church, listening to women whisper about places beyond Harold's reach. I even risked asking questions, careful, quiet, about the boarding house, enough to confirm it was real, enough to believe it might save us. But the betrayals kept coming, uninvited, sharper than blows. One night, I overheard Michael in the front room bragging to Harold about a fight at school. He'd shoved another boy for calling him the drunkard's son. Harold clapped him on the back, pride thick in his voice. "That's my boy. Teach him fear." And I understood then. My son wasn't just echoing cruelty. He was becoming it. He was choosing it. That cut deeper than any slap or shove ever had. Because a mother can endure her own pain, but watching her child grow into the very monster she feared, that's a wound that never closes. Still, Ruth clung to me. She'd slip her hand in mine, whispering questions no child should have to ask. "Mama, will we always live here?" I wanted to lie, to soothe her, but I forced myself to speak plain. "No, baby, we won't always be here." She blinked at me, wide-eyed. "You promise?" I didn't promise. Promises were chains, and I was already bound tight enough, but I kissed her forehead and whispered a prayer I wasn't sure anyone was listening to, that she might live to see a life without fear. Harold could smell my restlessness. He'd stumble home from cards or taverns and catch me staring at the door too long. One night, his face red from drink, he cornered me in the kitchen. "You got eyes on the road, woman," he growled. "You think I don't see it? You think I don't know you're itching to run?" I dropped my gaze the way I always had. "No, husband." He grabbed my chin, hard enough to bruise, forced me to meet his eyes. "Don't forget who owns you." The words burned. For 40 years I had bowed my head, swallowed my voice. But that night, something slipped out, soft but unbreakable. "You don't own me." The silence after was heavy as stone. He slapped me hard enough to split my lip, and I tasted iron, but I didn't take the words back. Not then, not ever. That night in bed, blood drying on my tongue, I realized something important. Fear wasn't keeping me alive anymore. Fear was killing me slow, one breath at a time. And worse, if I stayed, if I let Ruth grow up thinking silence was survival, then I wasn't just killing myself. I was burying her future alongside mine. No, I couldn't let that be. The plan crystallized clear in my mind. One night, when the moon was thin and the house drunk with sleep, I'd take Ruth's hand, pull the coins from my hem, and walk out the door. I knew the danger, knew Harold would hunt me, knew Michael might even help him. But better to die running than to rot in chains. So I waited, gathered, watched. Each coin I stitched was another step toward freedom. Each whispered detail about buses and boarding houses was another brick out of the wall. And each night I stayed. I wasn't staying out of weakness anymore. I was staying because patience was my weapon. And when the right night came, I would use it. The night I chose was colder than bone. The kind of cold that creeps into your joints, stiffens your fingers, and makes the whole world sharp. Maybe that was a mercy. Cold keeps you awake. Cold makes you move. Harold had drunk himself into a stupor, snoring thick in his chair by the fire. Michael was gone, swaggering with his friends, no doubt spending coin he hadn't earned. Only Ruth lay asleep upstairs, her small body curled beneath the quilt. I sat at the kitchen table with the lantern turned low, my hands trembling as I unstitched the hem of my Sunday dress. Out spilled the treasure of months, $36 and some coins. Not enough for safety, but enough to move. Enough to put distance between us and Harold's shadow. I wrapped the money in a rag, tied it tight. My hands shook, but not with fear. What I felt was something I hadn't tasted in decades. Dangerous, holy, electric. Hope. I crept to Ruth's bed and touched her shoulder. "Baby," I whispered, "wake up." Her eyes blinked open, dazed with sleep. "Mama, what's wrong?" "Shh." I pressed a finger to her lips. "We're leaving." She didn't argue. Children raised in cages know when silence is survival. She slid from bed, clutching her shoes so they wouldn't clatter on the floor. We moved like ghosts through the house, every board groaning like it meant to betray us. At the door, I lifted the key from its nail, slid it into the lock. The click was soft, but to me, it was a hymn. I opened the door. The air outside was sharp, clean, alive. Stars scattered across the sky like witnesses. I took Ruth's hand. "Come on." And then, "Where you think you're going?" The voice cut through the night like a whip. My blood froze. I turned. There at the top of the stairs stood Michael. His hair was mussed, his eyes glassy from drink, but his grin was clear. "Running off, Mama?" he slurred. "Gonna leave Daddy? Leave me?" Ruth's grip on my hand tightened. My heart thundered in my chest, but I forced my voice steady. "Go back to bed, Michael. You've had too much." He laughed like Harold. "You're pathetic. Always sneaking, always whispering. You think you can just walk away? You're nothing without this house, nothing without him, nothing without me." The words sliced, but I didn't let them anchor me. I turned to Ruth. "Run!" Her eyes widened. "Mama, run!" She bolted into the night, bare feet slapping dirt. I moved to follow, but Michael lunged, grabbing my arm. His fingers dug deep, iron strong. "You think you can take her?" he snarled. "She stays. You stay. This is our house." And in his face I saw it plain. Not my boy, not the child I once nursed through fevers, but Harold's heir, his cruelty, reborn, rage flared hot, wild. I had taken Harold's blows for decades, bowed my head, swallowed my voice, but my son chaining me with the same cruelty that I could not bear. I lifted my free hand, nails sharp as knives, and raked them down his cheek. He shouted, stumbled back, his grip loosening. I tore free and ran through the door. The night swallowed me whole. The coins in my rag clinked like church bells as I sprinted after Ruth. She was waiting by the fence, trembling. "Mama," she cried. I grabbed her hand, pulled her close. "Keep running. Don't look back." And we ran, through mud, through frost, through fields that clawed at our skirts. My legs burned, lungs screamed, but I didn't stop until the house was only a dim glow behind us. For the first time in decades, I thought, I am free. But freedom doesn't come easy. Behind us came the shouts. Michael's, ragged with rage, Harold's, hoarse but booming. They knew I had broken the cage. Ruth stumbled beside me, breath tearing. "Mama, they're coming!" And I knew she was right. We couldn't outrun them, not yet. Not with Harold still strong, not with Michael full of fire. So I made a choice. A cruel, necessary choice. I pulled Ruth close, kissed her hair. "Hide," I whispered. I shoved her toward a thick patch of brush. "Stay here. No matter what you hear, don't move until it's quiet. Mama, do as I say." She ducked into the dark. I turned back, toward the voices, toward the men who thought they owned me. I walked to meet them, not because I meant to bow again, not because I was giving up, but because sometimes, to truly walk away, you have to let your captors believe they've dragged you back. That night wasn't my night, not yet. But the night would come, and when it did, I wouldn't run, I wouldn't hide, I would walk out in daylight, and I would never look back. They dragged me back into that house like I was nothing more than a sack of flour. Harold on one side, Michael on the other, their hands iron on my arms, my feet barely grazing the floor. They threw me against the wall so hard, my teeth rattled. Lantern light burned my eyes, smoke from Harold's pipe thick in the air. Still, I lifted my chin. Because if I bowed right then, if I showed them I was broken, it would have been over for good. Harold's face was red as raw meat, his voice a roar. "You think you can leave my house? Shame me in front of God and neighbor." Michael stood behind him, the scratch I'd carved into his cheek glowing like a brand. My son, my blood, smirking as if my pain was entertainment. "Where's the girl?" Harold demanded. "Where's Ruth?" I bit down hard on my tongue, tasted copper. I would not give her up. If they found her, so be it. But she would not be betrayed by her mother's lips. "Answer me, woman!" The blow came fast, cracking against my face. I crumpled to the floor, my skull ringing. Michael laughed. That laugh was the moment I buried him, not in the ground, not with prayers or dirt, but inside my heart. Whatever softness my son once had, whatever part of him was still mine, died when he found joy in his mother bleeding. I let them think they'd broken me. When Harold yanked me upright and shoved me into the kitchen chair, I slumped. When Michael sneered, "She won't try again," I lowered my gaze. I let them spit their fury, curse me, call me coward and fool. I let them believe the chains were tight, because chains are easiest to break when the jailer thinks you love them. But inside, I was no longer a wife, no longer just a mother. I was something sharper, something cold. For days they kept me close. Harold locked the money box, carried the key on his belt. Michael trailed me to the well, his eyes suspicious. They thought watchfulness would cure rebellion. It didn't. It only fed it. Ruth stayed hidden 3 days before hunger dragged her back. When Harold shoved her through the door, shivering and small, his eyes burned holes in me. "You'd turn my own daughter against me? She's mine too," I whispered. The back of his hand cracked across my face again, but I barely felt it. I was watching Ruth's eyes, wide, wet, searching me for strength. And I realized she didn't care about my wounds. She cared about whether I still believed we had a chance. I did. I had to. After that, the punishments grew harsher. He locked the doors at night, shoved the keys under his pillow. He ripped the secret coins from my hem, spent them at the tavern, came home laughing as though he'd gutted me in public. But what he didn't know was that I had already started keeping a different kind of ledger, not of money, of sins. Every bruise, every word, every shame. I recorded it in silence, etched it into my bones like scripture. The nights Harold stumbled home with another woman's perfume, the times Michael jeered at me, called me useless, the look on Ruth's face when she realized her brother wasn't protector but predator. It all went into me, stone upon stone, a weight I didn't carry in despair, but with purpose, because debts, once tallied, demand to be paid, and I would be the one to collect. The cracks began to show in Harold first. Neighbors whispered about his debts at the card table, about how his temper bled into business, about how his wife looked thinner every Sunday. Not pity. No, pity is scarce for women like me. But suspicion, curiosity, small-town talk that sticks like burrs. Harold hated it, hated the sideways glances, the preacher's polite questions. He grew restless, reckless, and recklessness, I knew, was the first sign of rot in a tyrant's walls. I stopped dreaming of escape. Escape was too small, too quiet. I began dreaming of something else, walking out in daylight, Ruth beside me, Harold's name in ashes, Michael forced to see me not as victim, but as the storm that unmade their kingdom. The thought no longer frightened me. It thrilled me. One night Harold sat ranting about the neighbors, the preacher, the whole world that was plotting against him. His fists shook. His face was a map of fury. And I thought, you are already half dead. The rest is just timing. I didn't yet know what form it would take. Fire, words, or ruin. But I knew this. When the reckoning came, it would not be silent. It would not be hidden. It would be the kind of storm people remember in whispers long after the embers cool. Leaving wasn't enough anymore. No. I wanted Harold on his knees. I wanted Michael to see it. I wanted Ruth to remember it. I wanted the world to know I had not been weak. I had been waiting. And when the waiting ended, it would be with ruin. The night it ended came without warning, though in truth, I had been waiting for it my whole life. The house itself seemed to sense it. The shutters rattled in the wind. The floorboards moaned beneath every step. The chimney hissed like a snake when Harold stoked the fire too high. Even Ruth, sitting small in the corner with her sewing, seemed to hold her breath. Harold had lost again at cards. He stormed in, red-faced, boots striking like hammers. Michael followed close behind, drunk on his father's rage, eager to play heir to the throne. "Where's supper?" Harold barked, slamming his fist on the table. "Where's my respect?" I stood at the stove, spoon in hand, but for the first time in 40 years, I didn't flinch. "It's coming," I said. My voice was steady, too steady. He noticed. He always noticed. His eyes narrowed. "You got a tone, woman?" Michael sneered. "She thinks she's better than us, Daddy. Thinks she can run again." Ruth's eyes flicked to mine, wide and afraid. She remembered the night we tried, remembered the drag back, the punishments. But I only shook my head, slow and sure. "Not this time, baby, not this time." Harold slammed his fist again, rattling the plates. "Say it," he roared. "Say you're mine. Say this is my house." I turned then, looked him in the eye, and for the first time in decades I said the truth. This was never your house. The silence that followed was thick, smothering. His face twisted. He lunged, hand raised to strike. But I had been waiting, planning, sharpening. The pot of stew boiled over on the stove, bubbling hot. I seized it with both hands and hurled it at him. The scalding broth splashed across his chest. His scream split the walls. He stumbled back, clawing at himself. Michael rushed forward, cursing, but I was ready. The iron poker lay by the hearth, heavy, solid, burning hot. I swung low, hard, striking his knee. The crack rang out like thunder. Michael collapsed, howling, clutching his leg. For a heartbeat, the whole house was nothing but noise. Harold screaming, Michael writhing, Ruth gasping, and me standing tall, the poker hot in my hands. I stepped toward Harold. He was on his knees now, coughing, his face a mask of pain. For decades I had pictured this, him bent before me, not in pride, but in ruin. "You thought I'd rot beside you," I said, voice calm as still water. "But look at you now." He rasped, tried to spit, his mouth too dry. "You'll never leave. You belong here, to me." I bent close, close enough for him to see every scar he'd etched on my face. "No," I whispered, "I never belonged to you." Behind me, the fire roared higher. The spilled stew hissed across the boards. The house, that house that had been my prison, groaned like it was ready to fall in on itself. I dropped the poker, turned to Ruth, reached out my hand. "Come, baby, we're leaving." She stood, trembling, but when her fingers slid into mine, they were steady. We walked to the door. Michael's voice cracked behind me. "Mama, don't." I stopped just long enough to look back. At him, my boy, my blood, my betrayal. "You made your choice," I said softly. And then I opened the door. The night air rushed in, sharp, clean, free. Ruth pressed against me, warm and small, but I felt her strength matching mine. Together, we stepped off the porch. Behind us, Harold screamed. Michael cursed. The house shook with fury. But I didn't turn back, not once. I had bowed long enough. I had run long enough. I had endured long enough. Now I walked. Each step into the cold was a step back into myself. Each breath of night air was a promise. To Ruth, to the girl I once was, to the woman I had finally become. They thought I'd die in that house. They thought I'd die beside him. But I learned how to outlive him, and I did not look back.